All right. Hello and welcome everyone to the Devstream 166 breakdown. So today we got pretty much all of the information about Lua's Prey, which is coming in 2 days on the 30th. And there is quite a bit more than I thought there was going to be to talk about with this update. We're getting quite a bit more than expected, considering the very Paradox is getting delayed into next year. And we are getting this update basically instead of what would normally be our kind of big end-of-year update. But I'm actually very excited for this, and part of it is that there's going to be a ton to test, but it seems like there's a lot of good changes coming that I'm very excited for. So first and foremost, we're going to do kind of an overview of everything that's coming in Lua's Prey. And then we're going to go into more specific, like, big changes, and big new stuff, like what VORUNA's kit is and all that good business afterwards. So first and foremost, in Lua's Prey, we are getting VORUNA, who is coming with basically an introductory cutscene for like her lore stuff, and she's also coming with a Levirian. Then we're getting a full Grendel rework, and I really do mean full Grendel rework. He's going to be very different from how he is now. And then we are also getting some Ureli buffs. So new Warframe, and also a second new Warframe, essentially, to be honest, with the Grendel rework. And then some buff ups for Ureli that I feel are going to be pretty minor, but still important. Then we're also getting Conjunction Survival. So Conjunction Survival is basically just like a small twist on the survival mode for this update. This is going to be where you're going to farm VORUNA and the new items. And you're going to be getting a new material, or a variant material, as I suppose it's called Lua Thraxplasm, which can be turned in for rewards, which is basically going to be a pity system for these modes. You're going to get more Lua Thrax based on the difficulty of the mission that you are doing. So if you are doing the Steel Path variations of these missions and doing like the level 200 Circulus and all that business, you're going to get more Lua Thrax towards those pity rewards that you can just turn that Lua Thrax in to the, I believe it's Yanta is going to have that shop for rewards that you might not otherwise get. So if for example, if you don't get the drop for like VORUNA's gun, you could get that reward from just turning in Lua Thrax to mean eventually, if you do enough of the mode and you don't get that drop, you will get that drop through this system, which I think is just great. Also, not detailed, but we are getting 4 new arcanes, with one of which we have kind of vague details on, that being that it is going to be an arcane that is going to allow you to get more max health for each health orb that you pick up. We don't know what like the stacking limits are going to be on that or what the final numbers are going to be around that, but it seems potentially quite interesting, especially if there's no limitation on it. Just like ever increasing more HP is something that could definitely be built around. We're also getting Zaku Deluxe, which includes the Lotus Deluxe skin. We've seen that many times before, but that is also going to be out. Then we're getting 2 new Tenet weapons. We're getting the Tenet Plinks, no word on any new special effects, and the Tenet Ferox, no word on any new special effects. The Tenet Ferox is going to be available for your the keys you get from Void Storms that I don't remember the name of. The ones that you turn into Ergo Glast over on the relays in order to turn those in. It's not a melee weapon, but it is available from there. So you'll be able to get the Tenet Ferox. And then the Plinks is available just normally like you would get from the Sisters. You'll have to just RNG it out and grab it that way. So that is going to be a thing. Interesting if they have new mechanics. These are both potentially interesting weapons. Somehow making us use the Plinks would be a very DE thing. And then the Ferox is a weapon that I've liked very much, and if it has like kind of a new benefit to it, especially anything that makes it an AoE weapon, of course, it will probably be quite good. We are also not detailed yet, getting the rest of the augment buffs from S to Z. There's always plenty of potential whenever they're changing and buffing all these augments, but of course we won't really know which ones are good or bad until this is out. Expect a video going over all of them from me. And then for Void Shells, we are getting Frost, Mag, Grendel, and VORUNA. I'll be honest, because these are like the non-prime models, for Frost, his prime model is not very different, so in the eventual case somewhere down the line where they make Frost good, I could see myself potentially using it. For Mag, she has so much Tenogen and all like her deluxe and everything else that I find it to be very unlikely that I'm going to use a Void Shell on her, because just all the other stuff isn't Void Shelled, and is just cooler models than her base model. Grendel, kind of the same thing. His Tenogen is really good, so I don't know if I'd go back to his base model. And then VORUNA. VORUNA's Void Shell looks like it's going to color sweet, it's going to be really nice and be excellent, but also base model VORUNA looks like she is also going to color very, very well. They did a few randoms on stream, and every single one of them worked out, both on the Void Shell and on her base model. So it seems like she's, art-wise, really going to be great. The Nightwave is also returning. This is going to be coming with the Protocol skins. The Protocol skins, for anyone that missed it, are the realistic weapon skins. So you just have just like a straight-up, just very real-world-looking pistol, and other skins like a sawed-off shotgun and such. They're going to be available through the Nightwave. We don't know if any of those are going to make it into just like the shop for you to purchase with Platinum, but potentially they're all from the Nightwave, which would mean quite a number of rewards based on the amount of Protocol skins that we've seen. Also, a bunch of quality of life, they said, updates, although some of these, the quality is a little questionable. The first one being that semi-auto fire rates are being lowered with increased damage instead. So this is interesting, in that what they basically want to prevent is if you're using a semi-auto weapon, they don't want you to click like, you know, just constant clicking, especially whenever you increase the fire rate. Can just like be very bad for the hands, and in general, people tend to use macro programs that will just like keep clicking for them in order to make that much more comfortable. And because they saw that as a trend, they want to take a lot of semi-auto weapons and lower their fire rate and increase their damage. Which, if done in the right proportion, I think could definitely make a difference for if these weapons are being used just at all. I'm definitely the person that has said time and time again that I want to see them add like literally 450 base damage to the Lex Prime just to see if people would suddenly start using it. And I think that there's a balance consideration for semi-auto weapons to do way, way higher damage, but of course have that slower fire rate, meaning that they can get to like fewer targets in the same amount of time, whereas doing enough damage is always the thing. These weapons would be able to get to enough damage more easily through modding and also just availability and such, but would have kind of a lower ceiling and a higher floor, as opposed to weapons that can hit everyone in the room and do enough damage, which is a super high ceiling and a much lower floor, where if it's not modded well, it won't do enough damage, and at the point where you're not doing enough damage, the weapon's not working. So yeah, this is, it'll be interesting to see, because I think proportionally, if you're lowering fire rate is amount of targets you can shoot in succession, essentially. So increased damage, there's certainly a point, there's a trade-off there where you've increased the damage enough to compensate for the lower fire rate, but also if fire rate gets too low, you can't get to enough targets, so even with like infinity damage, it still won't be good enough. It'll be interesting to see how this balance actually goes through, and if it makes any weapons like suddenly very good for like Eidolons or what have you, where the increased damage is all that really matters because you're trying to like one-shot a thing and get to enough damage, which is harder in those particular cases. Moving on. We have a remaining armor icon indicator in the HUD. So this is basically going to be like a little shield at the end of health bars, where if you're looking at an enemy, you can see what percentage of their armor is left. So if you use like a 50% armor strip on that enemy, you can see there's like half a shield there at the end of their health bar, and then it shows you basically whenever you have completely armor stripped them. This is basically just like a good feedback indicator to tell you that your armor strip abilities are working. The enemy is losing armor. The reason that this could be, I would say, construed as not particularly useful is because of the exponential nature of like the way armor works. Removing 100% of armor is pretty much always the goal, just from an effectiveness standpoint. Almost always it is the case where removing 100% of armor is the correct call. So this is definitely like better feedback for lower armor strips, but I don't know if it's preferable. Well, it's definitely preferable to have more feedback, but a full strip is what people go with because of the way armor scales. The exponential scaling really makes it so that all or nothing is really where most people are at, because stripping 50% armor is a thing you might as well not waste your time doing, but stripping 100% armor makes it so you can basically just obliterate whatever enemy you're looking at, which is interesting to think about. Also, elemental DR icon, soft launch. So this is only going to be on some enemies whenever they put it out, but basically if you're using a damage type that is not good against the enemy that you are shooting, it's going to give you an indicator to let you know. We didn't get to see what this looked like on stream, but it's definitely like a good thing. I think that if this is applied to Eximus auras and can tell you whenever an Eximus aura is basically making an enemy immune to a certain kind of damage, that in particular would be the very useful thing that this could do, because whenever you have like certain Xmas, especially overlapping, they can be immune to certain like amounts and kinds of damage, and that can tell you to like switch weapons or use some other kind of a thing. If you're firing an Ignis at the enemy, but they're entirely immune to fire, that's probably not going to do much, and having an indicator there to let a player know and get that feedback that they're not really doing anything would be good. Also, health orbs in general are being buffed. Health orbs are going from 25 HP healed to 50 HP healed, so doubled. And the most notable effect that this is going to have is that this makes Equilibrium twice as good. Equilibrium has been a mod that some people use anyway, but I've always thought of as being on like the cusp of usability, like taking too much investment for not enough payoff. This doubles the payoff of Equilibrium, which makes it considerably more attractive. So I think there's a number of different builds I want to try that out on to see just how much better that is, because getting 55 energy from health orbs instead of getting 27 is quite a bit of an improvement. So yeah, that's going to be super interesting to test that out with Equilibrium and such. And just in general, health orbs being better, I suppose, is good, especially for new players. If you encounter a health orb, it's going to be much more important that you're healing for 50 instead of 25, because in the early game, that's where that kind of stuff matters much, much more. But for higher level players, Equilibrium is probably going to be the main thing there. Also, I don't know why this was in the quality of life section of the stream, but base HP for Xmas is being increased, but their mercy threshold is also being increased. What that means is that they're going to be chunkier dudes, but they're going to get mercy killed at like 80% health, basically, which is an interesting choice. It definitely opens up like more opportunities for them to be mercy killed, but I personally am of the mind that mercies in general need more of a just overall rework and to be integrated into the game more explicitly, so that you can do them more often and consistently to make those mods actually matter, and also to make that more of like the chainsaw in Doom, where that would give you like a burst of like ammo, energy, and all that stuff to keep you going. And right now, theoretically, you could kind of do that, but not really in effect. Also, another change for Xmas is that they lowered the minimum timer for an Xmas to spawn to 60 seconds. I don't know if that's going to be on all missions, but that could be problematic, definitely early game for newer players, but that means you're going to see more Xmas in missions just in general than you even are now. That combined with this change will be interesting to see if players have trouble with. Also, I literally did not list them here, but Conclave is somehow getting quality of life changes instead of Conclave being removed. I thought we were amping up for Conclave getting removed on stream, and that would have been super hype. But yeah, Conclave's getting some changes. I don't think anyone that watches this channel gives a single solitary fuck about that. Let me know in the comments if you somehow do. That would be interesting to hear from both of you. But yeah. Also, the Lewis Prey supporter packs, those are going to be in the market for Platinum this time as a test to see how that works out and to see how players like it, which I think is a positive change. It means that people can essentially farm Platinum by trading with other players, and they'll have access to those supporter packs. It also potentially removes a lot of Platinum from like the overall Warframe economy. Plenty of potential positives for DE on that end to not make them a money-only pack, and just makes it accessible for free-to-play players who are willing to trade, which is honestly, in my evaluation, all upside. Of course, I think that supporting Warframe and buying the supporter packs and stuff, spending money on DE as long as you are happy with what they are doing, I think is very positive. And then Trinity change, status immune AoE under enemies affected by her 1, and it'll do like 10% of their health every so often. Very minor. Trinity, I mean, she's fine right now. She's like very tanky right now, but overall, very minor change that's probably not going to change anything, and you're still just going to remove her 1 in favor of like Roar or Dispensary or whatever else. Moving on, let's talk about VORUNA. First and foremost, she has this absolutely beautiful Prex card. Reminder, you can go to brozime.com or click the link in the description to go to these notes if you want to get this super high resolution, awesome image of her Prex card for whatever reason. It is a very, very nice. Thank you, DE, for providing it to me. It is very, very nice. She's also getting a Levirian, as we said before. She has the Paragale signature weapon, which is a burst fire sniper rifle, which seems pretty interesting. The stats seemed pretty competitive on that. And she has the Sarfang axe signature weapon, which is a big heavy blade for her, which heavy blades are kind of in a tough place right now, so I don't see them being I don't see it being particularly great, but maybe it'll be all right. We'll see with that one. Sniper rifle is definitely the more interesting one. Now, in terms of abilities, her passive is to hold an ability and choose a passive mid-mission, which means you can switch between all of the passives on all of her abilities unless you helmet over it. So, first and foremost, the Shroud of Dinar. The passive is parkour velocity, allowing you to bullet jump through missions faster, and you will be invisible while not attacking. So until you attack, you are invisible with your 1-up. This is also a speed buff while you're invisible, so this basically allows her to move super, super fast. Also, she gets a crit and status buff on kill while leaving invisibility, which basically means while you're leaving invisibility, you have a couple seconds to get a kill, and when you do, you get buffs, which seem to affect all of her abilities based on what they said on stream, but at the very least are going to affect her weapons. We don't know how much the crit and status buff is, but definitely a compelling ability. Moving very fast is very good, and getting crit and status buffs is generally also quite good. Then we have the Fangs of Raksha. I've missed an A here. My apologies. We'll slap that in there. So the passive to this is to be immune to status effects, which includes knockdowns, which is, as we know from Prime Sure-Footed, quite good. This is a lunge that applies 10 stacks of 5 random statuses and then spreads on kill of that enemy. The lunge itself does not have to kill the enemy, just the enemy needs to die, and then those 10 stacks of those 5 random statuses will be spread to other enemies. So this is obviously very compelling with grouping abilities, and especially so whenever you're putting multiple different stacks on one enemy. If you use this twice, theoretically, you would not be able to roll the same ones again unless they stack beyond 10, which means you could basically very, well, theoretically, easily apply every status in the game to an enemy that's kind of tanky, and with enough range, be able to keep that going to all enemies within fairly significant radius, which would allow you to do some really gross stuff with condition overload. And that would combine very well with her 3's passive, which is 100% heavy attack efficiency, which means theoretically you could do a hilarious build around where you put every status in the game on enemies, and then with your heavy attack efficiency that you've built up to a 12x combo, do 12x heavy attacks with condition overload into every status in the game, which basically means with your status weapons that can inflict slash on all of their heavy attacks, you would pretty much be dealing damage cap slash to any enemy you hit with that. Which, while probably not worth all of that setup, is funny. And I will certainly be trying it. But yeah, between these like first 3 abilities, well, the passive anyway, we'll get to the rest in a moment. But between these first 2 abilities, I think there's already like a very solid thing here, with like being able to take down groups of enemies with the Fangs, because this does affect multiple enemies at a time. And then like using your 1 to get around, be safe, and be fast. That stuff seems pretty good. Moving on, the rest of Lycath's Hunt, besides just the passive being the heavy attack efficiency, which is already kind of a build-around thing you can do, 100% health orbs on melee kills, and 100% energy orbs on headshot kills. So, killing enemies with headshots, constant energy. Killing enemies with melee kills, constant energy. Because, of course, you're going to be using Equilibrium. If you're going to be planning on a melee build for her, she can just like do whatever she wants if she's running Equilibrium, because everything she does is going to give her both health and both energy. So that sounds great. This is also going to push Equilibrium because it is a 50% on helmet. So if you are a melee-based Warframe, say Valkyr, for example, 50% of the time you're going to be getting a health orb out of an enemy, which with Equilibrium will convert that into energy, which actually might give a good energy economy to Valkyr. That means that the only remaining problem would mean you would have to use this on Valkyr, as opposed to being able to bring an armor strip, which is what you need for Steel Path Cascade. Though, a lot of people won't find that to be very important, and instead just want, like, you know, tons of sustain on Valkyr, which you'll definitely be able to get with this ability. Also, potentially very good on, like, Excal. And any number of different melee Warframes, potentially Baruch, and so on and so forth. And then, for her 4, the passive is, it dies in your place with a 30-second cooldown. So, basically, this wolf head will die in your place. 30 seconds later, that buff will come back. If you die, you instead don't die. And this is also, the active ability is kind of a pounce stance, where you, like, crouch down and get 5 lunge charges that apply slash to enemies. This did appear to be single target, but it has a damage increase on kill. We don't know, of course, all of the numbers associated with this, but basically the idea is you turn this on, you kill the weakest enemy, the second weakest enemy, the third weakest enemy, and so on and so forth, and build that damage up into killing the strongest enemy, which if you go that all in a row, it should do tons of damage. The big thing I see with this being a problem is that the lunges appear to be single target. If they had even, like, you know, a pretty reasonable AoE, say, like, there's like a 3 or 4 meter, like, moddable AoE, this could potentially do a lot. But because it didn't seem like it has that, and it seems to be only single target, this is very likely going to be the ability that we just helmet over and replace with whatever else that you want, whether that's, like, you know, any roar, gloom, any good ability. Just tons of stuff seems potentially possible here. And like a grouping ability, so you can use fangs, like, you know, larva, so on and so forth. Korra's ability, tons of stuff could be here, and it seems like her fourth is going to be the thing that is going to be the place where you just replace stuff if you're looking for a place to do that. But yeah, VORUNA seems very promising, seems very fun, looked great, seems like great stuff all around. Speaking of all of that stuff that I just said, but again, the Grendel rework. The Grendel rework is big. This is a big rework because it entirely is changing the desire of Grendel. It is not changing his theme, but it is entirely changing the gameplay style, really, of what Grendel wants to do. So, passive stuff. He gets 250 armor per enemy in his belly. He has a belly UI to monitor the health levels and, like, what is in his stomach. But he can only eat 5 enemies now. This is a buff. Only being able to eat 5 enemies means that you get up to, like, your maximum of your abilities with only 5 enemies being eaten, which means he's going to be much better in lower level play. And you don't need as much setup to do all of the things that he does, which is immediately good. It also is, as Pablo literally stated, better for gameplay with other players because you can't just eat every enemy in the map and then hold them in your stomach and be standing around while no one else has anything to do. So that's all very good. Also, you do not get any drain for enemies being in your stomach because you can only hold 5 of them, and there's no drain for that. His 1 is the same. You just eat a bunch of enemies, besides, of course, all of these limitations and changes that I just talked about that are all basically passive effects. His 2 is all of the buffs at once. So it is a big heal. He gets a new retaliation buff where if enemies hit him, they get 10 stacks of viral, and he gets viral damage added to everything that he does. And he gets more energy from orbs. So, lots of buffs on one ability. This is also his helmet, and is potentially very good. The 10 stacks of viral just going around to enemies that hit you is, like, potentially very strong in a number of situations. And, of course, just giving strictly viral damage. That's pretty solid whenever it comes alongside a heal. Going to be actually potentially very good for the helmet system as just a good damage buff. That is, like, for a Warframe that needs both a heal and could use some damage, this is going to be the only thing in the helmet system that can do both of those things, and it's super interesting because of that. Also, okay, sorry for the weird cut. Grendel's 3 and 4 have been swapped around. Moving on from his 1 and 2, his 3 is now his meatball. So, this ability is much, much better. There is no constant drain of energy while you have enemies in his stomach. Not full stomach. Just enemies in general in his stomach is what's necessary in order to not have a constant energy drain, which is fantastic. You're still going to get that drain whenever you're fully empty, but also you can just cancel the ability. And you can do everything while you're in this form now. You can use your 1, you can use your 2, you can use your 4, which is all fantastic and honestly exactly what I wanted for Grendel in general. He can be built just entirely around this ability and still be able to do the whole thing that he does. This is also going to give him more defenses now because it's kind of billed as a tank mode, but is also still going to be, you know, doing all of the things that it normally does with the damage and all of that good business. And notably, the movement of this has been improved. It seems like the momentum and, like, kind of velocity you can build up with it has been improved considerably. It can now go upstairs, for example. So I think that this is, I mean, I don't think that there's a huge reason why, like, moving this to the 3 and the 4 matters too much, because I think both of them are just going to be probably equally good abilities at this point, but it's definitely certainly very interesting to kind of be able to do all of your stuff and constantly stay in meatball. I do wonder if this means that, like, we're always going to want the augment to be able to kind of boost around with this and go through missions quickly, because the AoE clear that we're going to have from the new Regurgitate, I feel like is going to be pretty good. So this is now pretty much the same. You spit an enemy in a direction and they hit stuff. When they make contact with things, they do a large amount of AoE damage and leave a toxin proc on every enemy that they hit. What Pablo showed, which I don't think was like a max range build or anything, he said there's only a few mods on the build. It hit, like, I would say half a room worth of enemies, and it was like, nearly killing level 140, kind of just like regular dude enemies, which is pretty good considering he wasn't at high enough strength to reach 100% armor strip. And it is a 70 armor strip ability, which means you don't need that much strength to get to that 100% threshold. And as we talked about earlier, that 100% threshold is pretty important for increasing your damage. So I think with a build around with Regurgitate, it's definitely very possible that we're going to be in a situation where, like, boosting around with Meatball's Augment and just like grabbing and spitting enemies into crowds and like really like taking enemies out that way is going to be a very valid playstyle that's going to be really strong with Grendel. Very weirdly, I'm almost more excited for this Grendel rework than I am for VORUNA, because I think it kind of moves in, makes Grendel whole. It feels like it's really, really cohesive and good. So awesome. Hopefully we continue to get reworks that are in this vein, because this is what I would call like a real, true, like big style rework, even though like a lot of like ability stuff hasn't changed from like a visual standpoint. A lot of like the actual effects and the important bits have been changed in really significant ways. Moving on, let's talk about the Ureli buffs. Not a rework, really, just the buffs. We've heard about these. Her passive is more lenient, which basically means that you can stop moving for a second and you're not going to lose the bonus to your secondary damage, which is good. Her 1 applies damage vulnerability on enemies that are bubbled. This also works on Xmas, even if they don't get hit by the crowd control effect, so that's fairly good. You're going to do more damage. That's fine. Probably still an ability you're just going to put Gloom over, though, if I'm honest. Also, her Marlena now has startup invulnerability like Iron Skin and will build up more health for it as you take damage, which is solid for making it so that it lasts quite a bit longer, especially on Steel Path levels. Also, you can go into your operator without canceling it, so you can jump out of your operator and like hack things or do whatever you want, and get back onto Marlena and like not have to recast the ability and do all this other nonsense. You can just use the operator as you regularly would, which is really good. They did the same thing for Exgal with his Exalted Blade and all that, and that's great. No changes on the 3, which is a bit unfortunate. The Augment is kind of the only thing giving the 3 any play, but I suppose that's fine. It's kind of like the build you'll probably use on Ureli anyway. And then for her 4, it is now like a grouping ability, and then you can activate it again to detonate it. So it sucks all the enemies up into this big water ball, and then you can take them out, and then if you don't, it'll explode, or you can activate it or hold the ability to pull them all in, and it has to have it explode immediately. This stuff is all improvements to Ureli. There's nothing here that is like a downside or a negative, I would say. But it is like pretty minor overall. But Ureli is a perfectly playable frame, not a frame that I would say is in like a huge rush to absolutely need a rework because they're like infinitely far behind other frames. But she's just kind of like middling. But that's fine. Middling is, it's the middle. It's definitely not the bottom of the bin. But yeah, moving on. Self-damage stuff. These are kind of just like some smaller notes just in general. Self-damage, they were going to put it into this update, and I'm so happy they did not. Basically, they're still going to work on it, and we are going to see those self-damage changes come back in and like remove the self-crowd control and stuff at some point, but that is not going to be for this update, which I think is great because over the course of like, Christmas and like the winter break that DE Studio usually takes and stuff like that, there's a lot of stuff that can just get lost, and including this and having all those changes and needing to do all that stuff while there's like, a brand new Warframe and like the Grendel rework and all this other stuff that is going to be in this update that's probably going to be, in need of more attention to like, any like new tweaks or changes that they want to do. You don't want to include something like this at the same time. So they are still going to like continue to work on this, and it will eventually come in an update. And they'll try it out and do like more specific feedback with it, but I think it's definitely a good choice to not push it in this update and wait for some time next year to put it out and see how people feel about it and, kind of take some more time with it. Also, the new Prime Access, which we don't have a date for, is, shocker, Baruch, and no one is surprised by the melee weapon, which is Cobra and Crane Prime, which is his signature melee. And then we also get the A-Furus, which is, yeah, the Ac-Furus is, their guns. With no gimmick, there's basically a 0% chance that the Aphurus are useful in any way. Cobra and Crane seemed like it might be okay, maybe just for the passive of Baruch that he gets with it. And then Baruch Prime looks really good, but, like, you know, it's, you know, we knew it was going to be Baruch. Still looks like Baruch. I think the helmet's really strong on him. I'll put an image up here. Sorry, I don't have one in here. I really should. But yeah, image of Baruch right there. I think he looks like pretty good. Pretty good and fine. I think the weapons are going to be like middling to bad probably on this PA, but Baruch himself is going to be more accessible than ever with his Prime because his regular is locked behind Fortuna, which understandably a lot of people don't want to farm through because base Fortuna is pretty poor and it's behind Vox Solaris. Also, updates on cross-platform play. So we will soon be getting more platforms added to cross-platform play. They do not give specific dates for this because they want to kind of just like very naturally do it to be like, okay, turn PlayStation on, did everything burn down? Yes, no, and just like kind of implement this like, you know, on a slower pace where they're not just like kind of asking everyone, oh, you're going to be able to get on and do crossplay. But very soon we are going to be getting Switch or PlayStation added into the crossplay. Obviously, Xbox and PC has been crossplay just continually for weeks at this point. But PlayStation and Switch are coming in soon, which is fantastic. I wonder when we're going to be at the point that the crossplay is just on, because when the crossplay is just on, it means we can start looking at cross-save. Also notably, some cross-platform fixes are also included in the new update, where you're going to be able to look at other players on other platforms' profile and such like that. So that is also good. More fixes going towards that, getting closer and closer to like the full cross-platform experience, which is fantastic. And then hopefully quickly after cross-save, which I know a lot of people are excited for, to be able to migrate from whatever console you're on to PC, or just to be able to play on PS5 or whatever you want to do. Cross-save helps everybody. So yeah, that's also great. And then in terms of the Deviri Paradox, we have honestly kind of a surprising note, which is that for the Deviri Paradox, we are getting a January dev stream for the Deviri Paradox. This is very likely, of course, to be at the end of January, but I'm surprised in general because usually DE is like, you know, a little slow to get going after like the big Christmas breaks and stuff, because not everyone goes on Christmas break all at once at DE. And like it's usually kind of like a rotation of people for a few weeks there, and we usually don't hear much until February. But getting a dev stream in January sounds great to me. I would be very surprised if Deviri Paradox, like, you know, if we have like the January dev stream into a February release, I'd be pretty surprised to see that. But it'll be interesting in terms of where that goes from there. But no more dev streams for the rest of this year. But yeah, that's dev stream 166. Really good. Super excited for. I mean, basically, just really like the big bulk of it is I'm very excited to test out VORUNA, her new weapons, and Grendel. And then like mess with like, you know, the new survival and stuff, especially like doing like the Steel Path versions and stuff for more rewards, and like the new pity systems and stuff in terms of those kinds of new styles that they're trying to go for. Really good dev stream. Seems like lots of good changes for a filler update. Seems super solid, and I'm very excited to get started on it. And that'll be in just a couple days here, which is also very nice because we weren't expecting this update until December, but we're getting it at the end of November, which is just fantastic. But yeah, I will see you guys later. I'm going to be streaming tonight over on twitch.tv/Brozime as is usual. So catch me there. And of course, on the 30th, I will be live with the new update. Shock and surprise, I know. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you guys tomorrow.